Some people lose everything in a single day. Others lose something far more painful. The place they once called home. In the spring of 1889. Long before the Arizona Territory became a state. Two Apache women were forced to walk away from the only people they had ever known. Not because they had committed a crime. Not because they had betrayed their tribe. But because both had become widows. And someone decided their grief was contagious. The elders called it tradition. The women called it exile. A lone cowboy called it wrong. The first rays of sunlight crept across the red cliffs surrounding Black Mesa. Morning mist drifted lazily above the cottonwood trees lining a narrow creek. The Apache village was already awake. Children chased one another between the lodges. Women prepared breakfast over small cooking fires. Hunters inspected bows before heading into the mountains. From a distance, everything looked peaceful. Only those standing near the council circle knew peace had already ended. Chief White Eagle stood silently before the gathered tribe. At nearly 60 years old, he had guided his people through droughts, harsh winters, and violent conflicts. His decisions were rarely questioned. Not because everyone agreed with him. Because they trusted his wisdom. Today, that trust felt heavier than ever. Beside him stood three respected elders. Their expressions remained stern. One finally stepped forward. The signs cannot be ignored. Another nodded. 2 husbands. 2 deaths. 1 season. Murmurs spread through the crowd. No one spoke loudly. But everyone understood exactly who they were talking about. Aiyana and Nokomi. Aiyana stood with her shoulders straight despite the dozens of eyes fixed upon her. She was 28. Graceful. Quiet. Known throughout the tribe for gathering healing herbs from the mountains. People once traveled for hours seeking her medicine. Children often laughed whenever they saw her returning with baskets filled with wildflowers and roots. Only 4 months earlier, she had buried her husband beneath an ancient cedar after an unexpected avalanche swept through a hunting trail. She never blamed anyone. She never blamed the mountain. She simply carried her grief in silence. Beside her stood Nokomi. Only 24. Smaller. Gentler. Her hands were rough from repairing saddles, weaving blankets, and building shelters. She rarely spoke unless someone asked. Yet nearly every family in the village owned something she had repaired. Her husband had died during the very same avalanche. Since then, the 2 women had quietly leaned on each other. Not because they wished to. Because there was no one else. Chief White Eagle slowly raised one hand. The whispers disappeared. His voice carried across the village. Our ancestors warned us. When death follows the same path twice, we must protect those who remain. Aiyana lowered her eyes. She already knew where this was going. An elder stepped closer. You are not evil. But sorrow follows you. Game has become scarce. The rains have been late. Children have fallen sick. Another elder added quietly, the spirits have spoken. Neither woman answered. Because there was nothing left to defend. Sometimes, fear becomes stronger than truth. A young warrior suddenly stepped forward. His name was Running Fox. Barely 20. His voice shook with emotion. This isn't right. They did nothing. My brother hunted beside Aiyana's husband. It was an avalanche. No curse. Several younger members nodded. But before anyone else could speak, an older elder struck his walking staff against the ground. The council has decided. Silence returned. Chief White Eagle closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they carried the sadness of a man choosing duty over his own heart. You will leave before sunrise tomorrow. You may take only what you can carry. You may never return. The words echoed across the valley. Several women quietly wiped tears from their faces. Others turned away. No one celebrated. Because everyone knew. Punishment did not always require hatred. Sometimes. It only required fear. Before dawn the following morning. The village remained unusually quiet. No farewell songs. No blessings. Only the sound of boots brushing against dry earth. Aiyana carried a small bundle of blankets. A leather pouch. Filled with dried herbs. And the necklace her late husband had carved from river stone. Nokomi carried a hunting knife. Several sewing tools. 2 worn blankets. Nothing more. Neither woman looked back. Looking back only made leaving harder. As they reached the edge of the village. Chief White Eagle stood waiting alone. No guards. No elders. Just an aging leader carrying the weight of an impossible decision. For several moments. No one spoke. Finally. He removed a small leather medicine pouch from beneath his cloak. He handed it to Aiyana. My wife made this. Many years ago. It once saved my son's life. Aiyana accepted it with trembling hands. You don't have to do this. The chief looked toward the distant mountains. I know. A long silence followed. Then he spoke so softly only the 2 women could hear. I pray. One day. Our people become wiser than our fear. His voice nearly broke. But he stepped back. Duty demanded it. The women bowed respectfully. Then continued walking. Without another word. Several miles away. Jacob Carter guided a small herd of cattle along a narrow mountain trail. 36 years old. Broad-shouldered. Weathered by years beneath the Arizona sun. His ranch sat nearly 20 miles west of Black Mesa. He preferred solitude. Life had become quieter after losing his wife, Sarah, to pneumonia 5 years earlier. Since then. The ranch had become his entire world. His horses. His cattle. His work. Nothing else. As he reached a rocky overlook. Movement below caught his attention. 2 women. Walking alone. No horses. No wagon. No escort. Their pace was slow. Deliberate. Jacob frowned. Apache women rarely traveled this deep into open country without family nearby. Something wasn't right. He dismounted quietly. Watching from the ridge. Several minutes later. Another figure appeared far behind them. Chief White Eagle. Standing alone. Watching the women disappear into the desert. The old chief never called after them. Never moved. Eventually. He turned around. And walked back toward the village by himself. Jacob had seen enough frontier life to recognize heartbreak when it stood before him. By late afternoon. The desert sun had become unforgiving. The women's water pouch was nearly empty. Nokomi stumbled. Her knees struck the rocky ground. Aiyana immediately knelt beside her. We should rest. Nokomi forced a weak smile. If we stop. We may never stand again. Before Aiyana could answer. The sound of approaching hoofbeats echoed across the valley. Slow. Steady. Neither woman reached for a weapon. They simply watched. A lone cowboy emerged over the ridge. Jacob Carter. He stopped several yards away. Removed his hat. His eyes moved from one exhausted woman to the other. Then to the nearly empty water pouch. Finally. He spoke. His voice was calm. Without pity. Without hesitation. You don't have to die out here. He pointed toward the western horizon. My ranch is 3 hours away. It isn't much. But there's room. Aiyana looked at Nokomi. Neither woman answered. Trust had become a dangerous luxury. Jacob waited. He didn't pressure them. He simply untied his own canteen, walked forward slowly, and placed it on a flat stone between them. If you decide to come, I'll ride slow. If you decide not to, the water is still yours. He stepped back, giving them the choice. For the first time that day, the future no longer belonged to fear alone. Then, a distant shout echoed across the canyon. Jacob turned sharply. Several mounted Apache warriors appeared on the ridge behind them. One voice thundered across the valley. Stop! Bring the widows back. The voice echoed across the canyon. Bring the widows back. Jacob instinctively stepped in front of the two women. Not with his rifle. With his body. 5 Apache riders descended the rocky trail at a steady pace. None appeared eager for bloodshed. But every man carried a bow. Every saddle held a rifle. The rider in front slowed his horse only a few yards away. He was young. Broad-shouldered. His dark hair was tied behind his neck with a strip of red cloth. His name was Red Hawk. A respected hunter. One of the tribe's finest scouts. His eyes never left Aiyana. You must return. His voice remained calm. The council has called for another gathering. Nokomi frowned. They already sent us away. Red Hawk lowered his head briefly. I know. Something has changed. Jacob folded his arms. If they wanted these women gone yesterday, why do they want them back today? Red Hawk finally looked toward the cowboy. You have no place in this. Jacob answered evenly. I think I do. They're standing on free land. And neither one looks eager to go. Silence stretched between the two men. Neither reached for a weapon. Neither wanted a fight. Aiyana stepped forward before the tension could grow. Why now? Red Hawk hesitated. The elders say. He stopped. As though the words themselves tasted bitter. They fear outsiders may accuse the tribe of abandoning you. Nokomi looked down. So this isn't about us. No. It's about honor. A painful smile crossed Aiyana's face. They worried about honor after we were already gone. No one answered. Because everyone knew she was right. Jacob calmly picked up the spare reins from his saddle. They've made their choice. Now these women deserve to make theirs. He turned toward Aiyana and Nokomi. I'm leaving. My ranch is west. If either of you wishes to ride with me, you may. If not, I won't stop you. For a long moment, the only sound came from the wind brushing through the desert grass. Then, Aiyana walked toward Jacob's horse. Nokomi quietly followed. Red Hawk closed his eyes. Not in anger. In disappointment. He knew forcing them back would only prove the women had never truly been free. You've chosen. He said softly. I hope you find the peace we failed to give you. Without another word, the 5 riders turned their horses around. Within minutes, they disappeared beyond the canyon walls. Jacob watched until the last rider vanished. Only then did he exhale. We should keep moving. The journey lasted until sunset. The Arizona landscape slowly changed. Dry desert gave way to rolling grasslands. Cottonwood trees lined shallow streams. Wild horses grazed across distant hills. Finally, Jacob pointed toward a weathered wooden house standing beside a broad valley. Home. The ranch wasn't grand. A modest cabin. A sturdy barn. Several fenced horse pastures. A vegetable garden. Smoke drifted gently from the stone chimney. Everything showed signs of careful maintenance. Nothing showed signs of luxury. As they approached, a large sheepdog bounded toward them. Its tail wagged furiously. Jacob laughed. "Easy there, Scout." The old dog stopped beside the women. Sniffed cautiously. Then leaned against Nokomi's leg. For the first time in days. She smiled. A real smile. Jacob noticed. But wisely said nothing. Inside the cabin, warmth replaced exhaustion. The smell of fresh bread lingered in the air. Shelves held jars of beans, flour, dried apples, and preserved peaches. Aiyana looked around quietly. Everything had a place. Everything was clean. Jacob removed his hat. "I haven't had company in years. It may not be perfect. But it's yours as long as you need it." He pointed toward 2 small bedrooms. "My wife and I built those ourselves." His voice softened. She would have wanted someone to use them. Neither woman asked what had happened. Some grief deserved silence before questions. Jacob gathered blankets. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight." Aiyana immediately shook her head. "No. This is your home. So is the barn." He smiled. "The horses don't mind sharing." Before either woman could argue, he stepped outside, leaving them alone. The first few days passed almost without conversation. Jacob worked before sunrise. Repairing fences. Checking cattle. Cleaning irrigation ditches. The women quietly found their own routines. Without being asked, Nokomi repaired broken harnesses stacked in the workshop. She straightened loose porch boards. Sharpened dull kitchen knives. Repaired cracked wagon wheels. Jacob noticed each improvement one by one. He never discovered her working. Only the finished results. Meanwhile, Aiyana explored the hills surrounding the ranch. She returned every afternoon carrying baskets filled with herbs. Willow bark. Yarrow. Wild sage. Mountain mint. One evening, Jacob watched her hanging fresh bundles beneath the porch roof. "You know every plant out there?" She smiled gently. "Not every one. Only the ones willing to teach me." He chuckled. "I've lived here 11 years. I still can't tell half of them apart." "You've been looking at grass." "I've been looking at medicine." For the first time, the conversation came easily. Spring turned into early summer. The ranch slowly transformed. Wildflowers surrounded the cabin. Fresh vegetables filled the garden. The horses looked healthier than ever. One morning, Jacob entered the barn before sunrise. He immediately noticed something unusual. One of his favorite mares, Belle, lay trembling on the ground. Foam gathered around her mouth. Her breathing came fast. Jacob knelt beside her. His stomach tightened. He had seen this once before. A poisonous weed. If he guessed wrong, the mare wouldn't survive until noon. Aiyana entered moments later carrying fresh water. She took one look. Then dropped to her knees. "Move her head." Jacob obeyed without hesitation. She examined Belle's gums. Her heartbeat. The smell of her breath. Then stood. "I need fresh willow leaves. And wild charcoal." Jacob frowned. "Charcoal? It'll bind the poison." He didn't waste another second. An hour later, Aiyana carefully fed the mare a dark herbal mixture. They waited. 1 hour. Then 2. Finally, Belle struggled to her feet. Weak. But alive. Jacob gently rubbed the mare's neck. He looked toward Aiyana. You just saved the finest horse I've ever owned. She smiled. My father always said. Animals speak before people notice something is wrong. Jacob laughed softly. I think your father would have liked this ranch. I think. Aiyana answered. He would have liked you. For a brief moment. Neither looked away. Something unspoken settled quietly between them. Not romance. Not yet. Something deeper. Respect. By midsummer. Word had begun spreading across neighboring ranches. Some spoke with admiration. Others with suspicion. The Carter Ranch is run by Apache widows now. I heard he's living with 2 women. People are saying strange things. Rumors traveled faster than truth. Jacob ignored them. The women did the same. Until one hot afternoon. Dust appeared along the eastern trail. 3 unfamiliar riders approached the ranch. Jacob recognized none of them. The leader stopped outside the gate. He smiled. But his eyes remained cold. We've come to collect what's ours. Jacob rested one hand on the fence. I don't remember owing anyone anything. The stranger glanced toward the cabin. I'm not here for your cattle. His smile widened. I'm here for the 2 Apache widows. Behind Jacob. The cabin door slowly opened. Aiyana and Nokomi stepped outside together. Neither woman showed fear. But both recognized the men immediately. The leader removed a folded paper from inside his coat. Then held it high. The territorial judge has signed an order. They're to be returned for tribal custody. Jacob's expression hardened. He had seen enough forged papers during his years on the frontier to know something wasn't right. But before he could speak, the stranger quietly rested his hand on the grip of his revolver. And smiled again. This time. Without a trace of kindness. The stranger smiled. Calm. Confident. Certain the paper in his hand would end the conversation. The territorial judge has signed an order. The widows are to be returned for tribal custody. Jacob didn't reach for his rifle. He reached for the paper. The man hesitated for only a moment before handing it over. Jacob unfolded it slowly. His eyes moved across every line. Then. He smiled. Not because he found it amusing. Because the forgery was painfully obvious. He looked back at the stranger. You misspelled the judge's name. The man's smile faded. Jacob continued. And Judge William Fletcher retired 6 months ago. Silence. The county seal is backwards. He folded the paper. Then calmly tossed it onto the dusty ground. So here's what's going to happen. You'll climb back onto your horses. You'll leave. And you'll never come back. The leader's hand tightened around his revolver. I don't think you understand who you're talking to. Jacob took one slow step forward. No. I understand exactly. I just don't care. For a long moment. No one moved. Even the horses seemed to sense the tension. The stranger finally laughed. You'd risk your ranch. For 2 women who aren't even your people. Jacob didn't answer immediately. Instead. He glanced toward the cabin. Aiyana stood beside Nokomi. Neither woman hid behind the doorway. Neither asked him to fight for them. They simply stood together. Strong. Quiet. Exactly as they had stood on the morning they lost everything. Jacob looked back at the 3 riders. You're wrong. They are my people now. The word settled across the valley. Not loudly. But heavily. The stranger's confidence disappeared. He realized this cowboy wasn't protecting guests. He was protecting family. The three riders exchanged uncertain glances. One finally whispered, "We weren't paid enough for this." The leader cursed beneath his breath. He knew drawing a weapon against a respected rancher could quickly become murder charges. Especially with a forged court order. Slowly. He climbed back into the saddle. "This isn't over." Jacob nodded once. "It is today." The three horses turned. Within moments. Only drifting dust remained. That evening. The ranch felt unusually quiet. No one spoke much during supper. Finally. Nokomi set down her cup. "You didn't have to do that." Jacob looked up. "Do what?" "Stand between us and them." He smiled gently. "I've spent most of my life fixing broken fences." She looked confused. He continued. "Sometimes. The fence isn't made of wood. Sometimes it's fear." No one said another word. But something changed around that table. The cabin no longer felt like a place where three strangers happened to live. It began feeling like home. A week later. Dark smoke appeared beyond the eastern hills. At first. Everyone assumed another rancher was clearing brush. Then the wind shifted. Ash began falling across the valley. Jacob stepped onto the porch. His expression hardened. Wildfire. The flames moved faster than anyone expected. Dry grass carried the fire downhill like a river of orange light. By afternoon. Families from neighboring ranches arrived in panic. Some had children. Others brought injured livestock. Several had lost everything already. Without hesitation. Jacob opened every gate. "Bring everyone inside. The pastures are yours." Aiyana immediately turned the barn into an emergency clinic. Burns. Smoke inhalation. Broken bones. She treated every patient without asking their name. Without asking where they came from. Nokomi organized blankets. Water. Food. Children too frightened to sleep. Jacob rode through smoke again and again. Leading trapped families back toward the ranch. Long after sunset. One final rider appeared through the haze. Barely conscious. It was Red Hawk. The young Apache warrior collapsed from his horse. "My people." He gasped. "The fire. Our village." Aiyana didn't hesitate. She grabbed her medicine satchel. "We're going." Jacob looked at her. "The fire's moving straight toward Black Mesa." "I know. They're still my people." The three of them rode through smoke thick enough to hide the stars. Trees cracked as flames climbed into their branches. The air burned inside every breath. When they reached the Apache village. Chaos surrounded them. Children cried. Horses screamed. Several lodges had already collapsed. Chief White Eagle struggled to lift a fallen timber trapping two elderly women. Without thinking. Jacob jumped from his horse. Together. He and Red Hawk pulled the burning beam away. Meanwhile. Aiyana treated the injured beside the creek. Nokomi organized families toward safer ground. Hour after hour. No one asked who belonged to which community. Settlers carried Apache children. Apache hunters rescued ranchers. Everyone simply fought to survive. Just before dawn. The fire finally passed. The valley stood blackened. Scarred. But alive. Several days later. The tribe gathered once again beneath the council circle. This time. No one stood accused. Chief White Eagle slowly walked toward Aiyana and Nokomi. His shoulders seemed older than before. He removed the eagle feather necklace worn only by tribal leaders. Then. To everyone's surprise, he bowed his head. I believed fear would protect my people. My fear almost destroyed them. He looked toward Jacob. This man, whom I once considered a stranger, saved lives that should have been my responsibility. He turned back to the two women. I asked you to leave. You chose compassion anyway. I cannot erase what I did. But I can admit I was wrong. The entire village remained silent. Not because anyone disagreed. Because everyone had witnessed the truth. With their own eyes. The chief extended both hands. If you wish to return, our home is yours again. Aiyana looked toward the familiar faces around her. Children she had once treated. Families she had once helped. The mountains where she had grown up. Then she turned toward Jacob. Standing quietly beside his horse. Waiting. Never asking her to choose. Aiyana smiled. Warmly. Peacefully. Our home, she said softly, is no longer behind us. She walked to Jacob's side. Nokomi followed. The chief nodded. A single tear slipped down his weathered face. Not from regret alone, but from relief. His daughters had found a place where no one would ever cast them aside again. 1 year later. Travelers crossing western Arizona often stopped at Carter Ranch. Not because it was the largest. Or the richest. But because everyone knew what waited there. Fresh bread. A warm bed. A helping hand. Widows. Orphans. Lost travelers. Former soldiers. Anyone with nowhere else to go. No one was turned away. Above the front gate hung a simple wooden sign. Jacob had carved it himself. No one is unwanted here. Children laughed beneath the cottonwood trees. Horses grazed peacefully across the valley. Nokomi taught young girls how to mend saddles and weave blankets. Aiyana gathered herbs with several apprentice healers who wanted to preserve the knowledge her father had passed down. Jacob repaired a fence while occasionally glancing toward the cabin. Aiyana walked across the yard carrying a basket of fresh wildflowers. Their eyes met. No grand speeches. No dramatic gestures. Just the quiet smile shared by two people who had built something stronger than either of them imagined. She reached him. Slipped her hand into his. He held it gently. The evening sun settled behind the Arizona mountains. The wind carried the scent of pine and sage across the valley. Years earlier, fear had driven two widows away from everything they loved. Now, love, dignity, and kindness had given them something far greater. Not simply another place to live, but a family they had chosen. And a home where no one would ever be judged by the sorrow they carried. Only by the goodness they shared.